All right, deep divers, are you ready? Because today we're going deep into the world of power and belief and controversy.
Lots of that.
And you know where we're headed with this?
Oh, yeah.
Our subject.
Mm-hmm.
David Miscavige,
The head honcho.
the enigmatic leader of Scientology.
Big job.
So is he a spiritual visionary guiding followers to enlightenment?
Mm-hmm.
Or a shrewd operator just building a controversial empire?
Well, that is what we are here to try to figure out.
And you guys sent in a ton of material for this one. Wikipedia articles, blog posts, news pieces. And let me tell you, they paint a picture that is anything but clear-cut.
Yeah, it's true. There's this real split, how is he portrayed? And I think to really understand it, we got to start with the basics.
Yeah.
How did this guy, born in 1960, end up leading a global organization? It's a wild ride.
Yeah, it is.
So Miscavige,
Mhm.
his involvement with Scientology started early, and by 16, he joined the Sea Org. That's their dedicated internal organization.
Yeah, that's right. And even as a teenager, he was apparently being trusted with some pretty important tasks from the Scientology founder himself, L. Ron Hubbard.
Mm.
The official Scientology website even says that no other church executive has ever gotten more direct communication from Hubbard than Miscavige.
So was that a sign of some, crazy innate leadership potential, or was there something, I don't know, more calculated?
Yeah, that is the big question, isn't it? And it gets even more interesting when you think about when he became the top dog.
Yeah, when he really took over.
Yeah, Miscavige became the chairman of the board of the Religious Technology Center.
What a mouthful.
Yeah, the RTC for short,
Okay.
in 1987. And that was just shortly after Hubbard died.
Wow.
He was only 26.
That is incredibly young
It is.
to be leading an organization like that. So is this a natural progression, or did he see an opening?
Yeah.
What was it?
Okay.
Okay, so let's talk about this RTC.
Yeah.
Because it sounds like a pretty powerful position.
It is. And from what I see here in the Wikipedia articles,
Yeah.
the RTC controls the trademarks and copyrights of Scientology.
Mm-hmm.
Basically all their intellectual property.
Yeah.
They license those rights to other Scientology organizations, which, I mean, that's got to be a lot of money.
It's a good chunk of change, yeah. But it's not just about the money.
Right.
It's about control.
I like that.
Control is really the key word here.
Yeah.
A 1993 memo from the Church of Scientology International actually lays out the RTC's authority. They can inspect any other organization's books and records. They can send in what they call corrective missions. They can even demand, samples of materials to make sure everything aligns with their quote-unquote orthodox application of Scientology.
Orthodox.
Yeah.
That's a word.
Yeah.
It makes you think, right? Are they just making sure everything is spiritually pure? Or is it more about keeping a tight grip on everything?
Yeah.
I can see why critics see the RTC as a tool to squash anyone who disagrees with them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And consolidate power. But of course, there's another side to this.
Of course there is.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And when we look at the Stand League blog, which is very much pro-Miscavige,
Okay.
they show him as this super charismatic and compassionate leader. They share stories about him, taking the time to congratulate some random kid on a TV commercial.
Oh, wow.
Or, comforting someone who was upset at dinner, that kind of stuff.
So, he's a man of the people.
Yeah.
Interesting. Because those stories, they're super different than, say, Leah Remini's book, Troublemaker.
Oh, yeah.
She's an ex-Scientologist who says she saw Miscavige being controlling and even abusive.
Yeah.
And she's not the only one saying that.
Yep.
Mike Rinder,
Mm-hmm.
another former high-ranking Scientologist,
Yeah.
he backs up those claims.
Right.
He even quotes L. Ron Hubbard's own writings
Wow.
that talk about what he called aberrative personalities.
Interesting.
And these are people who blame others, think they're better than everyone else, and always need to be admired. Rinder says Miscavige shows a lot of those traits.
Makes you think.
And there's more. Rinder says that Miscavige has refused to go through auditing,
Oh, wow.
which is a key practice in Scientology.
Yeah.
So what do you think that means?
I don't know. Maybe he's hiding something.
Right.
Who knows?
So we've got these totally different pictures of the guy.
Yeah.
How do we even begin to figure out what's real? Well, I think it's time to look at something a little more concrete,
Okay.
like Scientology's growth under Miscavige.
Yeah.
One of his big things has been these ideal orgs.
Yeah, I've heard about those.
They're these huge renovated churches in big cities.
Yeah.
And from what I'm seeing in these Wikipedia articles, these ideal orgs were funded through massive fundraising drives, Some donations were in the tens of millions.
Wow.
That's ambitious. It sounds almost visionary.
Yeah, it does.
But was it really about growing the religion? Or was there something else going on?
I don't know. It does make you think, though. Mike Rinder, in his blog, says some of these ideal orgs have been empty for years because they ran out of money. So it makes you wonder about the pressure to donate.
Right.
Was it really all about spiritual growth?
Yeah. And speaking of Miscavige's priorities, there's this whole thing about him apparently living full-time at the Flag Building in Clearwater, Florida.
Oh, yeah.
This place is enormous. A massive 377,000 square foot building just for high-level Scientology practices. And get this, they have custom equipment there that's supposed to make your perception better. I'm starting to think visionary and a little out there might go hand in hand here.
It definitely adds another layer to the whole thing.
Right.
But before we go too far down that rabbit hole, we have to talk about the big issue here, the allegations of abuse against Miscavige and the Church of Scientology.
Right.
And these aren't just rumors. We're talking lawsuits, FBI investigations, a 2009 expose in the St. Petersburg Times that talked about beatings and interrogations.
Yeah.
Heavy stuff.
And then in 2022, 3 former Scientologists filed a lawsuit accusing Miscavige of human trafficking and abuse when they were kids.
Oh, wow.
These are serious accusations.
Really serious.
And we can't ignore them.
We can't. And it's important to note that while the FBI looks into the church's activities at Gold Base, that investigation stopped.
Right.
Miscavige says he's done nothing wrong, and the church says all these accusations are made up by people who hate Scientology.
Of course.
But the fact is, these allegations are out there.
Yeah.
And they cast a big shadow over Miscavige's leadership. It's a lot to take in, isn't it?
It really is. We have these completely opposite views. Accusations of abuse and forced labor on one side and claims of spiritual leadership and saving Scientology on the other.
Right.
So how do we make sense of it all? How do we form our own opinions? I think that's what we'll talk about in part 2.
Exactly. We've set the stage, talked about the early years, and touched on some of the controversy surrounding Miscavige. But to really answer the question, is he a grifter or gifted, we gotta go deeper.
Stay tuned, deep divers. We'll be back soon with more on Miscavige's actions, what they've meant both within Scientology and the world at large, and we'll look closer at those allegations against him.
Yep. We'll break it all down and keep peeling back the layers of this crazy story.
See you in part 2.
See you, Matt. Welcome back, everybody.
All right.
Last time we were talking about the different ways people see David Miscavige.
Yeah.
And we need to look closer at those accusations against him.
It's serious stuff, but if we want to understand this guy,
We gotta talk about it.
we have to, right?
Yeah.
So we're talking about accusations of abuse, human trafficking, and forced labor. And there are sources, like that 2009 St. Petersburg Times article.
Oh, yeah, that was a big one.
It was a big one. And it really brought some things to light.
Yeah.
They talked to ex-Scientologists who said they were held against their will, abused both physically and mentally, and forced to work like crazy for little or no pay.
Those are really disturbing stories, and they bring up a really controversial part of Scientology. The Rehabilitation Project Force, or RPF for short.
The RPF.
It's basically their internal justice system, right?
Okay.
For Sea Org members who break the rules, critics and some former members say it's used to silence anyone who disagrees with Miscavige.
So if you speak out against him, you're in trouble.
Pretty much, yeah.
And what happens in the RPF?
So from what I understand, it involves hard labor, being totally isolated, and often just humiliating treatment. It's hard to imagine anyone choosing to go through that.
It sounds awful.
It does. And Mike Rinder, in his blog, says that Miscavige was directly involved in the RPF.
Oh, wow.
Not just overseeing punishments, but maybe even getting physical with members.
If that's true, that's really bad.
It is.
And this ties into another thing we've seen, this idea of disconnection.
Yeah.
That's where Scientology encourages members to completely cut off contact with family or friends who criticize the church.
It's pretty intense.
It's very isolating, right? It feels
Yes.
manipulative.
Yeah, many critics see it that way, like it's a tool to keep members in line and keep things secret. But, you know, the church says that disconnection is about protecting members from bad influences.
Okay, I could see how some people might believe that, but it still feels kind of messed up, you know?
I get it.
Especially when you think about the potential for abuse. Speaking of abuse, we talked earlier about fundraising for those ideal orgs.
Right.
But there are also accusations of financial wrongdoing on a much bigger scale. People are asking where all of Scientology's money goes.
Yeah.
Some ex-members say Miscavige lives like a king, using donations from believers.
Right. And then there's the whole network of corporations and businesses that Scientology runs.
They have a lot of businesses.
They do. And some critics say these businesses are just a way to funnel money to the top.
To Miscavige and his inner circle.
Exactly. They basically say he cares more about money and power than spiritual stuff.
But, like we've been saying, there are always two sides to every story.
Always.
And while these accusations are serious, Miscavige denies them.
Force.
And the church says they manage their money ethically and transparently. And then there's the Stand League blog, which paints a completely different picture of Miscavige. They say he's a dedicated leader who has modernized Scientology and made it global. They give him credit for making Scientology more accessible and appealing to a lot of people.
So it's like we're seeing two totally different realities.
It is. Right.
Yeah. How do we even know what to believe? Are the ex-Scientologists telling the truth, or are they just bitter? Are current members just brainwashed or afraid to speak out? Or do they truly believe in Miscavige?
Yeah, it's a lot to think about. And it gets even more complicated when you look at all the lawsuits. Remember, Miscavige has been sued a bunch of times, including that 2022 case where former Scientologists accused him of human trafficking and abuse when they were kids.
Right. And that case is still going on. We need to say again that Miscavige hasn't been charged with any crimes.
Right.
He and the church keep saying they did nothing wrong.
Okay.
But these legal battles are a big part of the story, and we need to see how they turn out.
Absolutely. What happens in court could really tell us a lot about whether these accusations are true. But until then, we're left with this question: grifter or gifted? On the one hand, we have accusations of abuse, control, and financial shady stuff.
Yeah.
And on the other, we have people who follow Scientology who see Miscavige as someone who saved their religion.
It's a confusing story.
It's really confusing. It's like the line between hero and villain is totally blurred.
Totally. So as we head into the last part of our deep dive, let's keep in mind everything we've talked about so far.
Right.
We've looked at how power works in Scientology, the different ways people see Miscavige, and those disturbing accusations. But to really understand all of this, I think we need to look at one more piece of the puzzle.
You're talking about Miscavige's relationship with those celebrity Scientologists, right?
Yeah.
Especially Tom Cruise.
Exactly. People have been talking about that relationship forever, and it could help us understand how Scientology really works and how much influence Miscavige has.
All right, deep divers, welcome back. We're in the final part of our journey into the world of David Miscavige. And like we promised, we're focusing on his relationship with Scientology's biggest star, Tom Cruise.
It's crazy how much attention their relationship gets, you know?
Oh yeah, it's like everyone wants to know what's going on there.
Yeah. Cruise has been talking about Scientology since the 80s. He always says how much it's helped him, both in his life and his career. But there are always these rumors about how close he is with Miscavige.
Yeah, more than just like religious buddies, right?
Exactly. Some sources even say Miscavige has a ton of control over Cruise's life, like what he does, who he sees, all of it.
Wow, really?
Yeah. We've even got ex-Scientologists like Leah Remini who say the church was involved in the breakups of some of Cruise's marriages.
Well, that's gotta be.
It is. Remini says in her book that she saw Miscavige trying to cause problems between Cruise and Nicole Kidman because Kidman wasn't really into Scientology. She even says the church did tons of audits on Kidman looking for anything they could use against her.
So if we believe that, Miscavige saw Kidman as a threat because she might pull Cruise away from the church.
Yeah, that's the idea. It's kind of like a Hollywood movie, right? All this drama and secrets.
It totally is.
Yeah.
But we got to remember, the church denies all of this.
Yeah, they say it's all made up, just people trying to make Scientology look bad. They say Cruise is totally devoted to the church because he believes in it.
Right, right. And we have to consider that side too. It's all about different points of view. It's up to each of us to decide what we think is true. But this whole thing about Miscavige and Cruise, it shows us something we've seen all along in this deep dive.
What's that?
Power. Control.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And it all goes back to the big question, right? Is David Miscavige a real spiritual leader, or is he just using people to get what he wants? Is he a visionary or a con man?
Yeah, is he grifter or gifted? Maybe, like a lot of these complicated people. The truth is somewhere in between.
Yeah, maybe.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive into David Miscavige and Scientology, what are the main points for our listeners? What should they keep in mind as they learn more on their own?
I think the most important thing is to be critical, to be open-minded.
Don't just believe everything you hear.
Exactly. Scientology is super controversial. There are people who love it and people who hate it. And there's a ton of information out there, and a lot of it doesn't agree.
Yeah, we've seen that, right? Different stories, accusations, defenses. It comes down to who you believe, whose story you trust. But whether you like Scientology or not, I think we can all agree, David Miscavige is interesting.
Yeah, he really is.
People call him so many things. A visionary, a tyrant, a savior, a con man.
It's wild. And in the end, it's up to you to decide what you think. To look at all the evidence, consider all the sides, and make up your own mind. Our goal in this deep dive wasn't to give you all the answers, but to give you the info you need to think for yourself.
That's what the deep dive is all about. We don't tell you what to think, we just help you think. So keep asking questions, keep learning, and keep diving deep. We'll see you next time for another exciting look into a complicated topic.